Hi, everyone. I felt the need to make this bonus episode to be as open, public, and visible about my story of why I felt I needed to transition. If you're a regular listener looking for board gaming content, this isn't going to be the episode for you, and there's absolutely no hard feelings for skipping it. That's why I've made it a bonus episode and not part of our regular content. This isn't going to have jingles at the beginning and end. There's going to be no commercials, just me talking through my history. I feel like there's a lot of emphasis put onto visibility as of late and how important it is for other trans and cis people to see and hear the stories of trans people, to know what we go through, and for trans people to know that they're not alone. There's some very dark themes in here at some points, but I feel that they're important to mention because they are part of my history. Transparency often leads you to dark places that are uncomfortable. The bottom line is, if this can help anyone out there, it will be worth it. I may ramble a bit, this may be a little bit stream of consciousness at some points, but I will get through it. May have to stop the recording to cry a few times. I already have. There's been sirens. It's been a whole thing. But I hope you do stick around for the whole journey. So first, a little bit of history on myself. I grew up in a very loving household in Lockport, New York. While my parents divorced while I was young, my mother always loved and cared for me. And my stepdad came into my life shortly thereafter, and I just call him Dad because he really is. He's done right by me. He's been a father figure in my life, and he is my dad. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything more from him, and I've always had loving parents. So a lot of people who say that this is a non-loving parent kind of thing, being trans, it's couldn't be further from the truth, in my opinion. I was always more into intellectual pursuits, so playing video games, my early foray into board games, before I got into the hobby, playing on my Commodore 64 and doing programming on there, watching Saturday morning cartoons. I was being outside and playing sports with others, playing football, soccer, basketball, that kind of thing. I always get called out for being tall and saying, well, you must have played basketball as a kid. And I was like, no, I'm uncoordinated as all heck. I, hate basketball. But I always felt more comfortable doing those more intellectual pursuits than being out there and playing sports. And I never really truly felt comfortable in male-coded spaces. I always kind of pretended, and you get good after 38 years of pretending to be comfortable in those spaces. You act like you are, but I've never really truly been comfortable in those just male-dominated and coded spaces. So fast forward a little bit from my immediate childhood, and when I got into my early career and late college, I used cosplay as a way to kind of explore my gender in a supportive environment. So it was always kind of a thing that was there, but cosplay kind of helped me be able to explore it in a very supportive environment. And looking back, in certain ways, I use cosplay as a means to escape my ordinary life. It's something that you used it to be something much larger than you actually were, and to be something that you couldn't present in the public eye. You were actually able to do those things, in this safe space. And I even made a movie about cosplaying whose intended theme was to be yourself no matter what, even if that theme didn't necessarily come through all the time, and the movie wasn't necessarily the best. I haven't watched it in quite a while, but I'm assuming that there would be some moments that I would cringe at, aside from the awful sound. But yeah, I think the whole theme behind what we were trying to do was to be yourself no matter what. And there were plenty more signs that I was trans that I ignored to come. So I actually went and sought therapy for being trans in 2011. It's something that a lot of people don't know. I was very quiet about it. I wasn't very vocal. I told a couple of friends at the time that I was going through it that were very close to me, and that's about it. So most people never even knew. My family never knew. I never told them. I was kind of too embarrassed about it, to really let them know that that's something that I was doing, which in retrospect, I wish I had, but it just wasn't something that I wanted to go through with them. The standards of care were so much different back then, and I think it's something important to bring up just how much we've kind of evolved from the standards of care and from how we treat being transgender. It was more of a disorder back in those days instead of exploring gender and transitioning to improve mental health. It was just treated as this disorder that you had. So and I think that there was almost a binary qualifier, like, how trans are you? Are you truly trans enough to get hormone replacement therapy and to transition? And I think that that's something that's kind of changed as well. There were almost some requirements, at least in the doctor that I had, of suicidal ideations to kind of almost prove that you were trans, that, you were going to hurt yourself if you didn't get treatment, which I'm glad that, as far as I've seen, we've kind of moved past. The one thing that I really remember that kind of sticks out at me from those early therapy sessions were the requirement that I draw pictures of how I see myself now and how I would see myself in the future if I had transitioned. And I always found that really strange because there's a lot of people that can't communicate through drawing, and myself included. Anybody that's listened to the show absolutely knows that. But it's something that I never really understood, like why this was so heavily weighted by my therapist that, I can't interpret what you mean from these drawings, so it must mean that you're not trans. It was really, really strange. And I always just found that so weird. I think if somebody could use that as a way of expressing themselves, then great. But I always thought of that being the requirement just being so weird. So basically, the way that worked out was either I go and work on my real life experiences and then seek hormone therapy, which at the time was a requirement. You had to have, I believe, 3 months of real life experience, they called it, before you could even get HRT. Or I could just try to ignore things and just try to put my femininity and being trans on a back burner. And at the same time, I had gotten an offer to move to Gadsden, Alabama, for a pay increase. So the decision that I had to make was, do I move down to Gadsden and put everything that I was doing for my transition on the back burner and try to suppress it? Or do I stay in Buffalo and try to work on myself? And I felt that my career had a little bit better opportunity in Gadsden. So I moved and I dealt with the pain of not being myself. I just basically tried to put those feelings aside, and I thought, well, maybe they'll go away, which anybody that's trans will tell you that's not the case, and that's not how this works at all. But I just tried to set it aside, and I moved. And I think it's really important to remember that the environment in 2012 was way different than it is now. So I had to hope for a better environment. And hope that either the feelings went away or that later on down the line, maybe I would be able to transition in a more supportive environment. So plant life was rough. There were a lot of late nights, long hours, unstable work schedules, and it kind of wears down on you mentally. You get food whenever you can. You get rest whenever you can. You try to do things for yourself and get together with friends whenever you can. And sometimes you're out doing something and you get a work call that you have to come into the plant. It's an emergency. Those are all things that weigh down on your mental health and definitely don't help when you're going through things. And in Gadsden, Alabama at the time, there really weren't any gender therapists that I could go and talk through these feelings with, unfortunately. So I just basically had to suppress them. And there was no way for me to really express my feelings and to go out as myself other than my apartment. So it was kind of this thing that I cooped up. So I got another opportunity a few months later. I wound up working in a regional capacity. I moved to Fayetteville, North Carolina, which was a little bit more supportive, but definitely still not the safest place to feel the way that I felt. And the other thing that I was going through was that I was on the road for upwards of 5 weeks at a time, going from one airport to the next, catching plane after plane, driving from place to place. And it's basically, living out of your suitcase. And alcohol sometimes became a coping mechanism for me. It was never to the point of addiction. It never got to the point where I couldn't exist without it. But it was just, at the time it felt like a helping hand when it definitely wasn't. It certainly was calories that I didn't need. And it certainly was substance that I didn't need. But it became a friend a little bit too closely. And I'm glad that it never really got to that point that I couldn't turn it off and that I was really addicted to it. So that was kind of my experience on the road. Again, just kind of going from place to place. And finally, I got the call to move up to Akron, Ohio. So I was still doing the regional job, but it was going to be a little less travel. And throughout all this, I got to go to some amazing places and meet some amazing people. And it's not to say that I didn't have some awesome experiences, because I definitely did. But there was still something missing. And even going in Akron and immersing myself in community activities and helping out the local Explorers Post and the local robotics team and helping others, which really kind of boosted my morale and got me, a little bit happier that I was able to help others and really provide something back to the community. I just knew that something was missing. I knew what it was deep down, even sometimes when I didn't want to admit it, but I knew that something was missing. So in Akron, I met my girlfriend, Allie, who really didn't have a problem with me exploring who I was. In fact, she supported me doing so. We met through mutual friends who knew that I was at least exploring my gender. There was a game night that they invited me to that they were hoping to set me up with her. We started playing Power Grid. As people who are very familiar with this podcast actually have heard this story before, but I was playing Power Grid and paid her absolutely no attention whatsoever. So they set up another game night, and I asked, is it okay for me to come as Arwen? Because I just wanted her to know if I was meeting somebody new, hey, if I can meet somebody new as myself, this is going to be a big thing for me. And this is going to be something that I'm more comfortable in this relationship and be able to bring my true self. And so we did. We had a great night. We wound up starting to date afterwards, and the rest is kind of history. But I felt much more comfortable exploring who I was after I met her. Slightly before and during my second round of therapy, which started in 2019, I started presenting female way more. So a group of us started frequenting drag bingo, which, even if you're completely straight, is still a ton of fun. I highly recommend it. It's an amazing time. But then Allie and I would start going to dinner. I would present female, and then we would start going to the grocery store and running errands and getting me a little bit more comfortable in the role and seeing how I felt and reacted. And the first times were just ridiculously scary, even though I came away from it knowing that, like, hey, this is fantastic. I haven't felt better. I'm myself. Deep down, I was comfortable, but outwardly, it was like, oh, people are staring. I'm the focus of everybody's attention when I wasn't, or very early on, I was, because I was drawing attention to myself because my head kept darting around and looking at everybody. So once I became more comfortable and just a little bit more chill, and this is my place, this is who I am, and developing that confidence, I started really becoming more myself, and just knew that, this was something that I really needed to seriously look at. So we sat down and I decided to start going to therapy. Really, I don't want to say decision point, because it really wasn't a point in time. It was a series of events that really led up to me making that decision. Was kind of the decline and death of the man who got me into gaming in the first place. And it's kind of ironic in a way. He was very conservative. I think he would hate me being myself and finally getting to realize myself, just because of his conservative nature. Anytime that I brought anything up, about people being transgender, you're always kind of feeling people out and presenting them with opportunities to kind of see what their stance is on it. It was always like, oh, that's terrible, and, people shouldn't do that, and that's not a thing, and, it's people with mental illnesses. It was something that I always got the sense that he didn't really support it. But I never really knew, because I definitely saw a side of him that a lot of people didn't. He had a lot of pain. He was hiding a lot from people. He had a different side to him that he felt that he had to put a veneer on for everybody else. And it was interesting to see that side of him. So I always kind of wondered what he truly felt, because I knew that there was kind of this protective layer there that he had to put on. And then I started seeing some of myself in that. And he had always struggled with alcohol and depression, and he used alcohol in a coping mechanism, but he got to the point of addiction, and it ultimately consumed him. And those were demons that he just couldn't fight off anymore. And we knew that the news was coming. We knew that it was going to get to him. He had been in and out of rehab, trying to quit, and did quit for a little bit, and then started right back up again. So it was something that he struggled with, and it ultimately took his life. And I got to the point that I didn't want to have the same regrets of not being myself, of having to put on this filter, as one of my friends so eloquently puts it. I don't want to live my life with a filter on it. And that's when I went to therapy. So in January, precisely January 27th of 2020, I took my first dose of HRT. I got pink lemonade. to have with it, and lit a couple candles, and that was that. So that was my first dose. It was a very special occasion, and I started slowly coming out to people that I knew in confidence. So my friends that I knew were very supportive of the LGBTQ community. They were very easy. The people that I knew were going to be most supportive, I started with them and kind of worked my way down the list. The hardest people to tell were my parents. And in many ways, the hardest people to come out to are the ones that you're closest with. The fear of rejection by those that you're closest to oftentimes will play tricks with your brain. And it definitely did in this case. I was so nervous. I had this 5-page coming out letter. I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified of what they were going to say. I told my dad first because I figured out of the two of them, not that I wasn't close with dad, but he was probably going to take it a little bit better. And then I told my mom. Mom had some issues with it for sure. Tried to talk me out of it, but I think hearing the person that you've called your son for 38 years is really your daughter can't be easy to take for anybody, despite how much you really love them deep down. And I know that my mother loves me. I know that she wanted to protect me, and the concerns and issues that she had were out of trying to keep me safe and knowing that this was going to be a hard road. You've seen the horrible stories online. You've seen how transgender people are treated by society. And it's a very difficult thing to deal with when you really care for somebody. But I'm incredibly grateful that we've had the support of our local PFLAG chapter up in Cleveland to kind of help bring us back together again. We've mended those bridges, and since coming out, I've had the opportunity to go shopping with my mom at a mall, which was a dream as a kid. She's done my hair. She's taught me how to cross stitch, which is something I really need to get back to because it's just so relaxing. Wonderful little rainy Sunday afternoon activity. I could just sit there all day and do it. But, it's something that her mother taught her how to do. So she felt it was very important that I knew how to do it as well. And those are all experiences that I never thought that I'd get to have. And I did. And I would hate to think that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that. Now, I haven't had to do this alone, and I think that it's really helped that I've had plenty of help along the way. Obviously, Allie's been a huge help. One of the women at work that used to be there, she's since left the company, unfortunately, that was trans. I wouldn't have made it through this whole thing without her. She's the one that recommended that we go to PFLAG. She's the one that kind of negotiated and set up meetings with HR to help me, get through this. So it was really amazing. And again, we talk about visibility, and the fact that I had somebody that was there that I could look to and that would help me was so incredibly important. I did lose people out of my life. I expected that. I expected that people were going to leave that wouldn't understand. But really what I didn't expect were all the friends that I would gain in my life and the people that would come into my life that I cherish, that are really, really special to me. And that's something that I thought that I would have a lot of loss, but I didn't know everything that I was going to gain. And that brings us to starting Cardboard Time. I wanted to share what I loved with people. I did that very early on through a YouTube channel and trying to get video reviews set up. And then when I started to get to the point that I wanted to transition, those videos stopped. I really didn't feel comfortable doing them anymore. I didn't feel comfortable with people knowing my story at the time. I didn't feel comfortable being public about it. So in November of 2020, I decided that a podcast would be a great way of being able to get myself out there and communicate with people and still have a little bit of privacy, even though my voice is definitely deep. I've tried to work on it throughout the years, but it's something that I was more comfortable with the voice being heard than the full video kind of being seen. Now I don't really have a problem with that. I've been on a couple of video podcasts and I have felt incredibly comfortable. And that's kind of boosted my self-esteem quite a bit after doing that as well. But at the time, I really wasn't. And when I started the podcast, I wasn't going to mention my identity at all. So it was a thing where I had a really tough time with it. It started off, I don't want to mention this at all. I don't want to be that trans woman that talks about board games. I didn't want the podcast to be known as, primarily, this trans podcast, and then I talk about board games. I wanted it to be board game centric. But as I've kind of grown to be part of the community and be a little bit of a voice, I have developed an understanding of how being visible can really help other people who are going through the same thing that I've been going through kind of navigate that. And to be this, hey, she's doing cool things, she's living her life, she's not just trans, she loves board games, she loves beer, she goes out and does things with her friends. There's life outside of this one little box. And I think that it's incredibly important that people see that. I really find that it's also a way of connecting with those who haven't had the opportunity to directly interact with somebody that's transgender. And I feel that it's a lot harder to just lump trans people into a vague concept when you talk with or hear from a friend that's going through it. It's like, I know this person who's going through this. I'm hearing all these horrible things about transgender people, but I know that that's kind of BS because I know somebody that's going through this and I know them. I think that a lot of the hate and the anger comes from trying to put transgender people into this box. And I'm trying to open that up and I'm trying to get people to understand that there's real people behind these experiences. So I want to kind of summarize my current day experience. I do have to acknowledge that I have a lot of privileges and I've had a lot of privilege in my transition. I've got a very supportive and open job with very good pay, open access to medical care. I had a great support network and friends and family who supported me. And I have to acknowledge that not everybody has these support systems. There's some trans women that are in constant fear of their environment and surroundings. There's some trans people that are struggling to decide whether to eat, have lodging, or to seek medical consultation. So to view my experience and to talk about my experience in isolation without acknowledging that would really be irresponsible of me. So while I still have drive and ambitions, I really finally have the one thing that's eluded me my entire adult life, and that's a sense of self and a sense of peace within myself. I am comfortable in who I am, and I'm finally working towards that congruency between my body and my mind. It's a tough road. It's not easy to this day, but at least the road is visible. The passengers I have with me are all really cool people to hang out with. It's tough because there's still a disproportionate amount of violence targeted to us. There's still absolutely this amount of stigma that's placed on being transgender because it's a relatively new concept to a lot of people. Even though in history there's been plenty of examples, there's just this kind of notion that this is something that's brand new. And usually it's perpetrated by people who have no idea that they've even met or know a trans person. Chances are they probably do. They've probably met somebody that they don't even know is trans. So we still really have to be cautious. Nobody can really tell you what your experience is going to be like. And there's no this is what it is to be trans book that you can just give to somebody. I tried to do that to my parents. When they were going through it, I was looking for anything that I could send to them to comfort them and say, well, this is what I'm going through, so you can understand it. It was a book that had been recommended by some transgender people. Hey, this is good reference material. Unfortunately, I don't think we have super good reference material to send to people other than a few articles that are online. There's no book that we can just give to somebody to say, yep, this is what it is. One of the examples from the book that I kind of look at is the fact that you have to take all of your old pictures down because it's going to remind your trans friend or child of their old life, and they don't want to see that. And that's not necessarily the case. I still have old pictures of myself up on the wall because those are very good memories. And those are things that I've been through that I really wouldn't trade for the world. And I'm not uncomfortable seeing those old pictures of myself. That it's who I was. It's part of who I am. So just to make this blanket statement of this is what you're going to go through isn't necessarily the case. And it's really a case by case, your mileage may vary, situation. So looking back at pictures, I wasn't unhappy. I might have been uncomfortable at times, but not unhappy. And I can really see the piece that's missing now in all of them. I look back and there's just this little bit. And if you're not looking, it's very difficult to see. But if you really, really look, you can kind of see it, especially in comparison to recent pictures. There's a lot of people that are like, you look so much happier now. I can just tell that you're being yourself. You're being you. And you're being genuine. And I'm authentically happy. And I think people can see that piece as well. They're able to go in and they're able to see, yeah, there's just this little bit that maybe wasn't there before. I think the biggest thing that I want people to hear out of this is that I have struggles even to this day, but I've never once regretted making the decision to transition. It is by far the best decision that I have ever made, and I feel like I'm a much better person because of it. I'm whole, I'm free, and the only person who could ultimately give me that happiness was myself. I recently saw a question on Twitter that really piqued my curiosity, and it's something that I've had to think about quite a bit. And it's, if you could go back and live your life as a cisgender woman, would you do it? I've really waffled back and forth on this. On one hand, I'd get to experience everything differently. I'd be able to go out and try out for the cheerleading squad, do ballet, learn beauty secrets from a young age, which would have definitely helped. I'm still very much on the struggle bus with my hair most days, and I still can't do eyeliner to save my life. And I'd be able to go to dances and prom in a gown as I always really wanted to. I hate suits to this day. They're terrible. But I also wouldn't necessarily have had all the experiences I've been able to have either. Those experiences have shaped me into the person that I am today. Battle scars and all, the things that I've been through, the struggles that I've had. My answer is no. I've stopped looking back on what I've missed out on. And I actually look forward on what I actually do get to do, which is to live my life authentically as myself. I never again have to ask myself, what if? And I've become so much more because of it. I get to live life going forward on my own terms without hiding anything. So the question becomes, why did I even make this episode? And for their safety, there's those who can't be visible and tell their stories. that needs to be respected. But for those of us who can and are able to, we need to be very visible. We need to help those who feel like they can't be themselves. Plenty of people have paved the way for me to be here as myself today, and I'm hoping that I can pave the way for somebody who wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity tomorrow. Maybe things will be easier on them. Maybe they'll be able to go and be themselves the first time that they go to therapy and not have to wait another 10 years to get to that point. I've seen numerous examples of trans people, even in my short time out, that just need that reassurance that they're valid and accepted. Being included in activities like gaming can have an incredible impact on their mindset. I've seen a trans girl go from not leaving her room for days to asking when the next game night is. When can we get together again? I've seen a trans girl take her first early steps out presenting as herself because a safe space was provided. But she felt comfortable because she saw the visibility and felt the acceptance. If you have these feelings and you're out there, you're not alone. You're valid and you're seen. I have been amazed at the supportiveness of the hobby towards the LGBTQ plus community for the most part, and seeing trans people being able to explore their identity for the first time in a safe environment makes me incredibly happy. There's absolutely more work to do, but I also feel like there's a significant emphasis right now on making everyone feel included, and it's something that I've had to learn is so incredibly important. I want to support that. I want to be part of it and be a good representative of the hobby. It's important that everyone feels like they have a seat around the table. So the bottom line is you can be out, you can be yourself, and you can do amazing things. There will be people like us to stand behind you. I think that's why visibility is so important. Because someone else might hear or see this and think maybe it'll be okay. Maybe I can come out. If you decide to come out and you need some help with your family, you might consider looking up your local PFLAG chapter. They've been an absolutely outstanding resource for me, and I wouldn't be here in a state to be as open and authentic as I am without their help. So now I'm going to go and continue to live my life on my own terms by having a beer and playing Cape May in my PJs.